Welcome back to the Indian MMA Hub. My name is David Andrew. I'm here back with Coach Siddharth Singh as he prepares for his pupil Anshul Jubli, who's going to face Quillan Salkit in his return to the octagon in the UFC 312. Coach, thank you so much for taking out the time today. As we begin, the first thing that I wanted to ask you was it's almost been a year since your student and you have returned to the UFC. How has this time been off for you and your student as well, in terms of sort of mentally dealing with this entire roller coaster? Not only like the recent loss, but like you guys from working in a small gym in your gym made it to the road to UFC, won two amazing fights in very exciting manner. Anshul won a 50k bonus. There's so many eyes on him. And then, of course, we all know the sport is a roller coaster. We deal with the first loss. So, talk to me about how this experience has been in general for you and Anshul as well.
Yeah, it's a crazy thing. It's been a crazy journey. Last few years have been absolutely insane. So just the rise of Anshul from the very first, he was unknown amateur fighter, and then he got a short notice fight against Sanjeev Budwar in Matrix Fight Night. Again, nobody knew him, nobody was giving him a chance, and then they called us only because they didn't have an opponent for Sanjeev Budwar. All the fighters were pulling out. So they reached out asking me, Coach, do you have anyone at lightweight? And I said, yeah, I have got one guy, and he's undefeated in his amateur record. Let's give him a chance. And actually, this whole process hasn't been very long. So what I'm talking about is 2019, I think, is when he got his first shot at MFN. And from 2016 to 19, he was just an amateur fighter. So it's not been a long journey at all. He spent 3 years with Matrix Fight Night, where he amassed, I think, 5 wins. He was 5-0 at Matrix Fight Night, beating guys like Sanjeev Budwar, Amit Raj, legends of Indian MMA. And then his rivalry with Shrikant Shekhar, post like the COVID era, was pretty amazing. That's the first time I saw Indian MMA. There actually being two camps.
Right, yeah.
There was Shrikant Shekhar camp, and then there was Anshul Jubli camp. So split the community.
Narratives.
It was insane how split the community was. You would have referees coming in telling me that I think Anshul will win, and the other referee is standing next to him like no, Shrikant Shekhar's got this. So to see that, like, so much of interest just with the hardcores was a completely new thing for me, because that interest is what, if you talk about UFC, that interest is what makes or pulls the audience.
Right.
That's the first time I saw actual rivalry. And then post Anshul's wins, we came to a point where he wasn't getting a new contract from Matrix Fight Night. I don't think Ayesha Shroff ma'am or Krishna Shroff knew about this. They were in the dark. So he wasn't getting a contract. We were constantly begging. Anshul also at one point said, can I fight at welterweight? Give me something. I need to be active. Wasn't getting a chance. And then and UFC reached out to me at the same time, offering us a chance at Road to UFC. And it was a no-brainer, because Anshul wanted to fight. He was in the prime. And yeah, I said yes straight away. Then the journey was a roller coaster in itself, because the first fight we got was against a Japanese guy.
Right.
And Show, his name was. And yeah, we reached there. We had a tough camp, in shape. And I saw Patrick, his opponent, and the guy was massive. Anshul is a big lightweight.
Yeah.
This guy was twice his size, and I was literally thinking about we've done something wrong, because if this is lightweight size, Patrick's size, Anshul is way too small. But anyway, we did a weight cut. It was a hard weight cut as always. He made weight, and then just as we made weight, we were told that Patrick was not even close to making weight, and that's when we got a bye.
Right.
And usually when Patrick missed weight, we thought we're out. We thought we didn't know how this worked. We were like, if opponent doesn't make weight, that means we don't get to fight, which means we're going back home empty-handed. But the UFC, Richard and the team from the UFC Asia team, they told us that no, you get a bye in the tournament. You'll be back to fight in the next round. And the next round was a hard one, because we got to fight against Red Horse from Korea, who's a brown belt in jiu-jitsu, solid boxing, well-rounded fighter. And again, this is something I've got to talk about a little bit, is there are countries that have been doing mixed martial arts for a lot longer than India has. So the developed countries in that sport, Japan, Korea, these are the OG countries. They've been doing mixed martial arts. Japan had Pride before there was the UFC. So these guys who were kids, they grew up with the UFC, with Pride, all these in their own country. India, we didn't have anything till like 2011, 12 when Super Fight League came in, and again it wasn't a very popular promotion. It was popular, but not what Pride was in Japan. These kids grew up with MMA, so the knowledge, understanding, the amount of gyms, the amount of black belts, the high level of training. So for Anshul to go against such a high level brown belt and established fighter and win, that was an epic night for me, because firstly we proved that an Indian can win inside the octagon. Yes, it was road to UFC, but it's still the fucking UFC octagon. First Indian to win inside the UFC cage. Epic feeling, tough fight. If anyone goes back and watches, man, it was a war. It was a war. It was a split decision. I thought Anshul won that fight, but it shouldn't have gone to split. But it was a very, very tough fight. So yeah, so that happened, and then that was pretty exciting, because when we finished the fight, backstage we met a bunch of UFC celebrities in the back congratulating us. I still remember we had Korean Zombie who was there. He came and he congratulated us, and because a lot of Koreans were fighting on the card.
Right.
So he came and he's like, he told me specifically that your guy is good. Like he's a good fighter. And then Forrest Griffin was also there. He spoke to us about it. So pretty exciting. And then we made it to the finals. And by this time, the road to UFC had a lot of different matchups already. So Jeka had fought Pawan Man in the first round. And again, Pawan Man, veteran of Indian MMA, former lightweight champion, welterweight champion of Super Fight League. He got this Indonesian guy called Jeka in the first round. And Pawan Man lost to a spinning back fist by Jeka. So there was a lot of rivalry there as well between India and Indonesia, because both, again, I spoke about Japan, Korea, established countries. Indonesia, India are similar in terms of it's still a new sport in these countries. So Jeka is a superstar in Indonesia, and I experienced this. How I'll tell you, because I went to Indonesia for my visa, and I messaged a few gyms because I was traveling for my visa. I messaged a few gyms, hi Coach City, I want to train with you guys if you get a free, because I train every day, and they would just refuse. They would just refuse because they would look at my profile, they would see that I'm Anshul's coach, and no gym permitted me to train, which is so weird for me, because I just wanted to teach or train or nothing, just for free. I didn't want any money. A lot of them ghosted me, a lot of them said no, not interested, thank you so much. Very weird experience for me. But then I realized it's because Anshul is fighting Jeka. And yeah, the fight was in Vegas. And again, a great and a new experience for all of us, because fighting in the US, fighting at the UFC Apex. And the guys who've seen it or not seen it, UFC Apex is basically like when COVID happened, UFC made its own small stadium, arena, where fights happen. And they don't need anything. They have everything in-house.
Self-sufficient,
and it's right next to UFC PI.
Right.
UFC PI is again a state-of-the-art facility where they have everything. They've got a weight area, they've got multiple MMA cages, they've got a mat area, they've got some of the best physiotherapists. There's food there, free food for all UFC fighters, nutrition there, all free of cost for UFC fighters. And you sitting at the reception area and you see all the top UFC fighters just walk by, and it's insane. It's like being like, I don't know, for guys who watch movies, it's like if you're a Bollywood fan, you're sitting there and Shah Rukh Khan is coming, Salman Khan is coming. They're all just walking by like it's no big deal. So for UFC fans, it's like that. We were sitting there and, randomly, like all the superstars, Derek Lewis is coming with his, he's having hamburger while he's going for training. It's crazy. It's how it feels so normal, but it's so also.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, it's insane. So yeah, met Forrest Griffin there. We trained a little bit. While Anshul was doing his pad work in Vegas, Cody Garbrandt was doing his pad work in the other cage. Um, yeah, it was insane. And then yeah, the time difference was a factor as well. Again, all this is new for us, so that's why I feel like all this has happened, and all the experience we've gained, I think it's going to be handy and useful in the future as well.
For sure.
Like how to plan fighting in the US, how to plan, now in Australia we have a bit of an idea because of the time difference.
Right.
We reached Vegas, and yeah, we wanted to. So I took a really stupid flight. I took a 40-hour flight. Anshul had a shorter one, but then yeah, he reached, I reached, and then we stayed awake the entire day because like we don't want to get jet lagged.
Yeah.
We reached on Monday. Friday was the fight. We're like, okay, we're gonna stay awake the entire day, sleep at night, and we'll be up. So we reached, stayed awake the entire night. We're like, okay, 12 at night. We're like, okay, now we're sleeping. We'll be up in the morning. No jet lag. It's all in the head. So we go to sleep at 12. We get a good night's sleep. We wake up fresh. We're like, okay, let's go train. It's all good. What's the time? It was 12:45 in the night. We literally got our afternoon nap, a power nap, and we're up at 12:45 at night. We slept for 45 minutes. It was like, oh my god, now what do we do? So yeah, it was. So these are the experiences we had, and then between all of this, Anshu started to develop a bit of a cough. I started to feel like he was a little bit warmer in terms of his body temperature. We didn't talk about it. We didn't address it. And it just happened to be that his fight was on my birthday. So yeah, it was one of the things where I told him, I said, I need a birthday present and you better win. Because I'm spending it with you instead of with my family and friends. So yeah, the fight was pretty epic. Yeah, big win for India. A completely dominant performance. A lot of people were again thinking that Jeka is going to knock Anshul out, blah blah blah. But I think Anshul showed in that fight that, despite him being sick, unwell, he's going to go in all cylinders, ablaze. And so fought really well, good fight. And that's when backstage again we met DC, Bisping, we met all these guys because now we're in Vegas, right?
Yeah.
Dana White called Anshul into his office. He spoke to Anshul about it. So yeah, it's just reaching that level where Dana White is calling you and talking to you. It's pretty insane. And to think about it, a few years ago, he was fighting in the amateur leagues where nobody was giving him a pro fight. So
Right.
the journey was a short one. And again, from Instagram's perspective, he had 3,000 followers when he was 5-0
Right.
in his professional career. And by the time he was 7-0, he was over 500k. So that's how quickly the UFC took Anshul's, following. It's absolutely insane. And yeah, then the Mike Breeden fight came up. And to be honest, in that fight, if I can be honest, I feel I will have to blame the coaches, including myself, for not prepping Anshul for a 3-round war. We all planned to finish the fight. We all planned that worst case scenarios, middle or second round, Anshul would knock him out. Game plan was that, strategy was that, everything was based around it. And then there wasn't too much from our side thinking that it'll be a 3-round war. We felt Anshul was better than Mike Breeden in many areas, and we thought we'll exploit it, and which Anshul was doing till literally the point where middle of the second round where where he was supposed to finish him and he hit him some really hard shots, but then it was our fault in terms of not executing a backup plan in the third round. What we thought was, okay, second round has happened, we won too easy, third one, let's just coast, we'll get a decision, worst case scenario. But that leaves your fighter in like a middle of no man's land. So I feel like that sitting on the stool at the end of the second, I think the coaching should have been better. We should have given him a clear and direct focus for the next round, which we didn't. So I will literally raise my hand and say that we fucked up. And it's again a lesson to me and to all the coaches that we need to have multiple game plans and strategies in place, which again we had never experienced that previously.
Right.
We never seen such a dominant first two rounds lead to a third round where the fight was blank. And he was blank because we had not prepared him. Basically, that's all it was.
Right.
So yeah, going forward, next fight, 312, UFC 312. Yeah, we have a game plan. We have multiple game plans in place. Can't give too much away, but yeah, game plan's ready. He's going to be, Anshul's going to be pushing hard. He's going to be giving it his 100% for sure.
Right. Okay. So yeah, thank you so much for the elaborate answer, coach. And also when you mention the takeaways from the last fight with Mike Breeden, one thing that I heard you mention in your appearance on the Make Sense podcast was also when it came to the third round was, as you mentioned right now, like it seems like even you as the coach along with Coach Mike believed that a second round finish was sort of in order. And you mentioned how in the podcast that I'm not quoting you verbatim, but you mentioned that there was a certain goal that was in mind, and when it wasn't achieved, it obviously led to a certain demotivation, maybe going into the third round. So that points to something that deals with the mental aspect of the game, and I'd be very curious to know how you yourself, obviously, and your student Anshul have worked on this in this time off. Like, how do you address that particular aspect of the game?
So there are two things, right? And it's something that I've always spoken to him about it. It's not to say what he did was wrong. No, it's always exciting when there's a finish in MMA.
Right.
It's always exciting, there's a knockout or there's a submission and all of that. But at the end of the day, the backlash of the fight was, oh, Indians can't fight, or he lost, blah blah. Man, if anybody saw that fight,
Yeah.
They would see how excellent Anshul was. His hands, his footwork, his cardio, everything was on point. But the fact of the matter is, 90% of the haters, as per se, they don't watch the fights. They
Right.
see the result the next day, or they watch the finish, and that's all. That's whether they make the judgment. And that's why I told Anshul. I told Anshul that, bro, there is no such thing as just trying to be an exciting fighter. If your MMA record is 7 wins, 7 losses, and you've had the most exciting 14 fights,
Right.
nobody cares.
True.
At the end of the day, people talk about GSP, greatest of all time, Khabib, greatest of all time. But if you watch quite a few of their fights, they seem boring as hell.
True.
Some of Khabib's fights, man, I study his wrestling, his entries. I went to sleep a few times, So at the end of the day, when they look back at, and with any other sport, with any sport, in cricket you look at how many centuries did he make, how many matches did a team win. That's all they care about. They don't care about the strategy used or game plan used. Hindsight, they look at, you become a GOAT or greatest of all time based on how many wins you're able to string together.
Right.
People forget how boring the fights were or whatever. So I said, the goal is not just to make it exciting. It always helps.
Right.
It makes you more makes you bigger, a more exciting brand. But we have to focus on getting the win, and at any cost. So that is one aspect of it. Second aspect of it was to, I've always spoken to Anshul about being prepared to go bell to bell. You should be ready from the time the fight starts to the final time the referee says stop in the end of the third round. You need to be balls to the walls, literally, like going end to end. And that's where we made a mistake, because it was an oversight on all of our part, because we didn't think it will go for whatever reason. But again, you have to understand the hype. Sometimes you start buying the hype yourself.
Yeah.
At one day before the fight, I'm getting a call from somebody who's like, I don't want to take the names, but Bollywood actors are outside your hotel room. They want to meet you. There's some world class, celebrity who wants to take us out for dinner a night before the fight. It's insane. We lost track of what was happening, and it's very difficult, because it wasn't even on me. It was on Anshul, and I was just on the peripheral.
Right.
And I got lost in the whole hype scene, because I'm like, what is happening? There was literally a guy who called us and he said, oh, we've hired like a private jet, and after the fight, we want to take Anshul here. What is happening? Like, where are we? What's going on? So that's what was happening. It was insane. If I was meeting Anshul, for example, for dinner in 5 minutes, I would message him on Instagram, okay, meet me for dinner in 5 minutes. and he wouldn't turn up. And I would go and ask him. He's in the room. I'm like, what happened? He's like, what happened? I'm like, I messaged you to meet me in 5 minutes, and he would show me his phone. My message wasn't there anymore.
Oh, man.
It was gone because it was just like messages. So that's what I'm saying. Like, most people don't realize what was happening to us in the last fight, and even his veins. At his veins, there were 30,000 people when the veins were going on. I mean, that was crazy, and that's again something which we hadn't experienced before. We fought in India before, we fought in Road to UFC before, but that card in Abu Dhabi was stacked. You know, the veins were more hyped than any of the fights we've been to. Again, when we were cornering, there's no way he could hear any of us because the audience was so loud. I don't know how many people were in the audience that day, but it was the loudest I've ever been to in an arena. So all those experiences for us, there is an element of adrenaline dump as well, because Anshul was jumping up and down, you know, just at the veins. And then again, first round he was jumping because the adrenaline, man, the fucking atmosphere, the vibe of the place. I mean, I've never been to a fight like that. So a lot of lessons learned there, which we've, the mistakes that we've made, we're gonna make sure that we don't make those mistakes again.
Right. Could you elaborate a bit on why there was such a long layoff following the last fight?
So a few things. First, we didn't expect the break is going to be so long. There were a few fights that we had planned and agreed on, which fell out for whatever reason, different reasons for different. But he was supposed to fight 2 times last year. Both, didn't happen. And then again in October, we wanted to fight on the Abu Dhabi card. And then the person we wanted to fight kind of had another fight that he got booked into. So it happens sometimes. Sometimes you're trying to get fights, but it doesn't happen. Also, I think there were a couple of niggles and injuries that Anshul was dealing with before the Mike Breeden fight, which we didn't took the time to heal from, recover from. No fighter is 100% going into the fight, but we just wanted to take some time because it's an important aspect of fighting. Like I really believe Anshul, with his full cardio and injury free, I think he can beat a lot of top fighters in the world. So our focus was really to make sure that he's injury free, and the gaps in his game we fill out. So we didn't want to rush into anything. So hopefully in the next fight you'll see an Anshul which has, he has hopefully 100% by the time he reaches the cage, and good cardio, improved skill set, and he'll be able to showcase a lot of new skills that he's been working on.
Right, because now as you mentioned the niggles, we found out recently that Anshul got a nose surgery done. He was dealing with it seems like he was dealing with it for quite a long time, which is, I messaged you, I remember messaging you saying that it's wild that he's been fighting with this through the tournament and won a contract with a broken nose. I know a lot of fighters have it where it breaks and then it just sets in that same place and they just keep fighting because they're we get it done after our career is over. So that happened. Then I believe he also suffered an MCL injury. So talk to us about that mentally, because coach, I won't beat around the bush when I say that ever since the loss, there's been a lot of criticism towards Anshul, and I was curious about how, on top of the loss, first of all, the athlete has to deal with his loss itself. Before we are upset about it, I'm sure he is. Then on top of that, he's dealing with not being able to come back, because I'm sure he's a young, hungry fighter. He wants to immediately get back and prove himself. And then on top of that, there's these 2 injuries which have now delayed his return again at that point of time. So how was that, and how has he recovered from it? What is your sense of that?
Yeah, he's in a much better space than he was. Obviously, it was the first time he was losing, and then people lose all the time,
right?
But to lose at the grandest stage where the entire country is looking at you, not the country, the entire world is looking at you.
Yeah.
So it does take a toll,
right.
And it affected us in a way which we didn't even realize, because again, it's uncharted territory. If we had nobody had prepared us, nobody has sat us down and said that, okay, this is how you feel when things are going up, and this is how things are going down. I've fought a lot, I have won a lot, I've lost a lot, but the highs of his success and then the lows after the defeat were not something even I could have foreseen, or any of the coaches, because your heart kind of goes out to him, because even guys who have no clue on how fighting works have an opinion on this. Man, he gave it his all. I think he lost, yes, but his performance I can't fault. Till like the end of second round, he kicked ass. He kicked ass, and then third round didn't go away. But that's so in his 8 fights, he's won every single round of every single fight. He's had one bad round in his entire career, and people are going mad. So it is what it is. That's how the sport is. You get, the fans when you win are behind you, and then when you lose, they're all against you. So it gives you a different perspective, makes you more humble, makes you appreciate the good times, and also like he realizes that he's got so much riding on him. Like his performance is not just him, but it's also like all the fans, the entire country, because there's a lot of India-Pakistan that happens as well. Like when again I'm talking about the Abu Dhabi weigh-in,
Right.
man, the audience was booing Anshul, and I was like, why are they booing Anshul? And then I realized 80% of it were Pakistani fans, and they just hated the fact that there's an Indian in the UFC and there isn't a Pakistani in the. There's a lot of that happened. So he really wants to prove it to everybody that Indians can fight, and he knows that he's got a lot of expectations on his shoulders. And he's excited. He's one of those guys who's excited about the challenge, and it's a very tough opponent as well. No? So he wants to do it against a killer.
Right. Following up what you just mentioned, a tough opponent, Anshul is going to face Quillan Salkild. He's considered to be one of the best prospects at lightweight to come out of Australia, eternal FC lightweight champion, if I'm not wrong. So, had you heard about Quillan before this fight was offered to you? And what was your first impression of him when this fight was offered to you? How did this fight come about?
So I had not heard of him, to be honest. I don't follow Australian MMA that closely. But when I did see the fights, I was like, yeah, good, tough opponent. But to be honest, man, if you look at the couple of weight classes in the UFC, lightweight being one, bantamweight being the other, you go through the list of fighters who are signed with the UFC, they're all champions of somewhere.
Yeah.
There's, someone is a Brazilian champion, someone is like a British champion, European champion. They're all champions everywhere. So at the UFC level, you're only going to find champions and killers. So we knew that he's going to fight a killer, and then when we got his opponent, we were like, yeah, that's what we expect. We want to fight champions. And if Matrix Fight Night had a belt, Anshul would have been the lightweight champion of India also. So yeah, you're ready to fight all champions. You're a champion yourself. So this wasn't really a factor. It was more about seeing, can we be ready for that date? That's Anshul wasn't focusing so much on the opponent. It was more on, will he be ready, in shape, in condition, injury free by the date 8th Feb. That was the concern. And then once we made a plan, his training camp, we were like, okay, he'll probably be in shape by then, so let's do this.
Right. All right. So, coach, I was wondering in terms of what your opinion is about Quillan's fighting style, because I've watched a bit of tape of his fights. A lot of his fights are available on YouTube. Also, his fight for Dana White Contender Series, and I think this is something in common between Anshul and him, because Anshul has made it to the UFC through Road to UFC, which is also a really tough tournament. And we see on the other hand, Quillan making his road to the UFC by coming through the Dana White Contender Series, and I believe it was like a really impressive showing of that fighter there. What do you think about his performance in the Dana White Contender Series fight?
He's a very tough fighter. He's a very tough fighter. He's good everywhere. He's got great hands. He's got excellent Muay Thai skills. He's got excellent wrestling. He's okay to defend himself once people shoot on him. He's able to, defend the takedowns and take the back. So he's got solid BJJ skills as well. So, like I said, at that level, at the UFC level of, if you're fighting a lightweight or a bantamweight, especially these two weight classes, you've got to be focused, concentrated from bell to bell. It's got to be one of those fights where it's a matter of inches. And I do believe that come third round, it's going to come down to who wants it more. They're both They're both killers, man, and it's a very it's one of those things where you have a game plan, you have a strategy, but at the end of the day, it's going to come down to who wants it more, who's willing to lay it on the line more. I do believe that this fight you're going to see Anshul who's going to give it 100%. I think you'll see the best version of Anshul in this fight. So rather than focusing so much on the opponent, I think it's more about what we are going to do and our game plan and our strategy, and then having obviously that heart of going bell to bell and not taking a step back and keep the pressure on the opponent, I think.
He's made quite a bit. He's done a lot of interviews in the lead up to this fight, and I won't say he's disrespectful in any way. He's actually quite a respectful young guy, 24 years old. But he's made a few statements, and I can't mention the quote verbatim, but like he said, in his opinion, it seems like he thinks Anshul is more of a tidy kickboxer who seems to not be as well rounded as he thinks he is, and he thinks that. He's basically mentioning again and again, he's mentioned in interviews like that he's going to get a finish. Much like I was thinking about how Anshul also did mention it before his Jekka fight. So like it seems like obviously he's a young, fresh fighter. He's excited to make his debut. I don't think he's disrespectful. I think he's respectful. But what do you think of his statements and his predictions? Is he underestimating Anshul in any way? What do you think about that?
I think what we experienced once we went to Abu Dhabi, that was it's so different from Road to UFC or Dana White's Contender. I think it's going to be a different experience for his opponent as well, just to be on that the biggest stage of them all. It's going to be a pretty exciting, and it's okay. I mean, the exciting bit about fighting is that you get to hype up the fight and you can say whatever you feel like, and it's also. You also say it because you also kind of hype yourself up for the fights. So I don't really have anything to say on that. But I do feel that that we have noticed a few things in Killian's game which I feel like we're going to exploit. It won't be as easy of a fight as Killian thinks it's going to be.
Right. All right, and if I would ask you to rate. Anshul's last two opponents, who would you think, like upcoming opponent and Mike Breeden, who do you think is a tougher fight? In my opinion, before you give your answer, I think like Mike Breeden maybe had a little more experience, but this fighter seems to be a lot more well-rounded. What would your thoughts be on that?
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. I think Killian is a much more well-rounded opponent. He's also younger. He's also been more active. But again, you don't want to go to the UFC and fight people who you think you can win. I think if you're going to make a splash, you're going to make a name, you're going to put India on the map, then you should be willing to fight anybody, anywhere. And Anshul wanted to make a statement. He wanted to go up against someone who, everybody thought cannot be beat.
Right.
And Killian is that. Everybody looks at him and like, why this guy? Why are you guys fighting this guy? I'm like, because the only way to come back is to do what people said is impossible. Like, even before going to Road to UFC, people said it's never going to happen. Anshul's beginning, man, when they said, Sanjeev Budwar, are you mad? First fight, marwa doge is bacche ko, Sanjeev Budwar will kill him. Anshul proved everybody wrong. Shrikant Shekhar time, the hype around Shrikant Shekhar, he just finished Jason and all that. Like, Shrikant will murder this guy. Anshul came back and proved everyone wrong. No Indian will ever fight in the UFC, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, Anshul proved everybody wrong. Nobody's going to win inside the octagon. Anshul proved everyone wrong. So, nobody's going to win that tournament, Road to UFC. Anshul proved everyone. So, it's all about proving things, and, you remember who was the first man on the moon, right? So, you remember him because it's all in. You do something which people say it's not going to happen, not possible. So when Anshul does get his hand raised, it's going to make it's going to change the scene for Indian MMA completely.
For sure. I really admire the confidence, and obviously all of us are hoping for that very same result. As you mentioned early on, this fight is going to be in Australia. one big issue we've seen fighters have is obviously the jet lag. It seems to be a lot more actually than the United States of America. And a second thing, I'm not sure. I'm sure you can clarify about that. The weight cut seems like you have a shorter window to recover, if I'm not wrong, because I remember Islam Makhachev having that issue when he fought Volkanovski the first time. So. Obviously, as you've mentioned, like the last time was the first experience. This is also going to be a new experience in terms of going to a completely different part of the world. There's only so much you can do to prepare, but what are the sort of preparations that you and Coach Mike have sort of figured out to deal with that in the best way that you can?
Yeah, I would have been more concerned if Anshul was flying from India, but the fact that he's training in Bali, which is a lot closer to Australia than India, there's a much lesser time difference, so that helps.
Right.
Number one. Number two, yeah, there is a bit of an issue because the cards which happen in Australia, they're focused around an American audience, which means sometimes fights start pretty late in the night. So it could be 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, something like that, which is because they're catering to the American crowd. But yeah, we've planned that. We have already got timings on what time the fight is going to happen for Anshul, tentative fight timings, and we're working like that. I mean, obviously we can't wake up in Bali at 3 in the morning and train, but we're just trying to make sure that by the time we get to the weight cut and by the time we get to the fight, we are on a clock which
Right.
kind of caters to the fight timing. So we were already on that.
Coming to the last few questions for this interview, obviously an MMA interview ahead of a fighter's fight would be unfinished without a prediction. So if at all you have a prediction in mind, what would it be? All of us would be really curious to hear about that. Are you also going into this fight looking for a certain outcome, or as you mentioned earlier, you're going to look for what comes its way and the aim is to go bell to bell?
Yeah, the aim is to go bell to bell, and that's also going to be the prediction. That's also what if the finish comes, great. But to be honest, the plan is to get that experience, getting that 15 minutes inside the cage when he's pushing 100%, because you only know how hard or how fast a vehicle can go when
Right.
you push it to the limit, right? So we really want Anshul to reach his limit this time. I still feel he's not been able to show his 100% inside the cage. So I really want him to be active this year. I want him to fight 2 to 3 times this year.
Wow.
And I think those minutes inside the cage are super, super important. And I say it to all the young fighters as well. I tell them that it's very important to get that cage experience, fight in the amateur circuit. Don't come to me asking me to turn pro if you haven't had 25 to 30 amateur fights, because you need to experience what it feels like to be inside the cage. And then again, before you get to the UFC, you need to have a lot of experience in your pro circuit. And then again, if you're going to be a contender in the future in the UFC, you have to have a lot of wars. So that's the way I've spoken to Anshul. Be prepared for a war. If the finish comes, great, but we won't make the mistake of last time trying to think that we're going to finish him the first or second. No, we're ready for a 3-round war. And to be honest, kind of disattached with the outcome. I just want him to go in and fight his ass off, leave it all in the cage, and then what happens happens. We don't care so much about win or loss. Obviously, I want him to win, but just solid 15 minutes, war, showcase all the skill set that he has. I think that'll be amazing. It'll be amazing to see an Indian going toe to toe with one of the best lightweights up and coming, and really showcase a full skill set, just to prove to everybody that Indians can fight. I mean, more or less that's kind of what he's fighting for Anshul right now, just to show the world that he can fight. So really excited to see this. It's going to be a war. It's going to be a 3-round war. Anshul by decision is what I would say right now.
Right. And I think, to be honest, if people across the world are still doubting whether Indians can fight or not, it's sort of ridiculous. I think not only is Anshul a really great fighter, we're going to have a lot better, younger talent emerging, training under you and many other coaches in the country. So I'm sure that's going to happen either way. So thank you for your prediction. And Coach, one thing that I missed out earlier when I mentioned Australia, the aspect of Anshul competing in his opponent's hometown, essentially, like it's home ground for him. And what do you think about that aspect? Because we know the Aussies and Indians, we have like a rivalry going on in cricket for a long time. Like, and to be honest, at some points it wasn't the best rivalry. Like, if you remember, with players like Glenn McGrath, and it's stuff has gone quite wild. They're known to be really passionate fans of their sport. So how do you think one fighter works alongside that fact, when you enter a arena which is going to be completely packed with your opponent's supporters?
We're prepared for that. We're
Right.
prepared for that. We know Killian is going to be coming in. He's going to be barking at Anshul. We know the audience is going to be barking at him. We know they're going to throw a lot of mean comments towards him. We know that, man. I mean, we're prepared for it. So when we're planning a game plan, we keep all these things in mind. We know it's going to be hostile. We know it's going to be rough. But we also know it's going to be rough on his opponent, because he's got the pressure on him. He's fighting on his home turf.
Right.
Everybody. Can you imagine the pressure on that guy if he loses to an Indian guy in his home? It's going to be insane for that guy. So I don't want to be that guy and his shoes. So I mean, we're excited. We're excited.
Yeah.
Like I said, there is some sort of excitement that comes from playing the villain, and Anshul is getting to play a new character, because in India he was always the fan favorite.
Right.
Everywhere he's fought, he's loved and adored. This is the first time he's going to have a full arena full of people booing him.
Yeah.
And again, Abu Dhabi, you had Pakistani fans, but he also had a lot of Indian fans and a lot of other people who supported him. Here, we don't expect any support whatsoever.
Yeah.
It's going to be. So I'm very excited. Excited to stand up against all the Aussies. It's going to be pretty epic.
Great. Thank you so much, Coach. On that note, like, I'd like to end this interview, and I'd like to really thank you for taking out the time. I know you're about to fly out to meet Anshul and join him as he goes to Australia to compete. Thank you so much for taking out the time. We really appreciate you. And before we end, if there's any message that you have for fans and followers of the gym and the sport in the country, I'd like for you to end with that.
I would just want people to keep supporting Indian MMA, right? So the fighters, it's a very tough journey. Listen, let me explain to you this way. We are not a sport that's recognized by the government or supported by the government. So all the fighters, their entire journey, it's self-funded. Who's funding them? Probably the gyms they're training at, if they're lucky, or their families, if they're lucky, or they're funding it themselves. So it's a very tough journey for fighters, and only a handful actually make it. So the guys who make it, they've sacrificed 8 to 10 years of their life, which they could have been anything else. They could have been a 9-to-5 employee. They sacrifice a lot of things for very little to no, nothing to show for it. So when these guys are out there, and if you have a chance to support them, please try to support them. I feel it breaks my heart to see so many good established fighters mentioning on social media, guys, please sponsor me, please help me out. They don't want money to party. They need money so that they can invest in their training. And tomorrow, when they fight for India, they represent India, they win for India, it's a glory for all of us. It's not just for them. So please, if you guys really want to support Indian MMA and you call yourself like the fans or help out these guys who maybe haven't made it yet, but you see they're fighting professionally, you see they're training hard. Give them a chance. You never know, they could be the next Conor McGregor, or they could be. But give them a chance, guys. Support them, and if you can't give them financial support, follow them. Follow them, support them, connect them to a brand that could potentially sponsor them. Share their content. That's the least we should be doing, supporting our guys, our sportsmen who are sacrificing so much. They have no guarantee that tomorrow they'll get a government job, because it's not a government sport. They're sacrificing so much. It was their passion initially, but now it's a lot about proving to the world that Indians can fight, etc., etc. They're fighting for the national pride, and we should support these guys. That's what I feel. That's what I want to talk to the MMA community about just giving back to these fighters.
All right, as I said, thank you so much once again, coach, for taking out the time. We wish you all the best as you fly out to join your student. I'm sure it's going to be an exciting time. The excitement must be building up as the event closes in. It is for us because like all we're doing is discussing this fight as the day approaches. So all the very best to you. I hope you convey the same to Anshul from our side, and I hope to have a conversation with you when you come back. Thank you so much for taking out
For
the time.
sure. Thank you so much for coming down, and follow the fight, guys. Hope you guys enjoy it. It's going to be epic. Yes.